I was sitting on the bathroom floor, shaking so hard the pregnancy test slipped from my hand. 2 pink lines. Again. My sister was outside the door, laughing. With him. Her husband. The man whose child I was carrying for the 3rd time. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stop the sound, but a sob escaped anyway. "Are you crying?" she asked softly through the door. My heart stopped completely. Because in that moment I realized something horrifying. If I opened that door, my entire life would collapse. Everything I had been hiding for over a year would pour out onto the floor between us. My sister's marriage. My shame. The 2 times I had sat alone in that clinic. The way he had slowly and deliberately dismantled my sense of myself until I could not see clearly anymore. I stared at those 2 pink lines and thought about who I was before he entered my life. I had been whole. I had been someone my sister trusted above every other person in the world. Now I was sitting on her bathroom floor carrying his child, listening to her laugh his name like he was everything good in her life. And then the doorknob started turning. Let me take you back to the beginning. You need to understand how this happened. Not to excuse any of it. But because what was done to me was deliberate, and deliberate things have a starting point. My name is Natalie Adrian. I am 26 years old. My sister Camille is 31. She married Felix 4 years ago and I was her maid of honor. I wore a cream dress and cried happy tears and believed completely that she had chosen a wonderful man. The shift came slowly. Too slowly to see while it was happening. Felix was attentive from the beginning. Quiet and careful about it. He remembered how I took my tea. He asked about my job interviews when nobody else thought to ask. He made me feel noticed in a way I had not felt in a very long time. I told myself it was just kindness. A warm brother-in-law being generous. Then one night, 8 months into their marriage, he knocked on my apartment door. He said he and Camille had fought badly and he needed someone to talk to. He looked broken in a way that made my chest hurt. I should have sent him home. Instead I let him in. And he sat across from me and said things that made me feel like the only person who truly understood him. And when he touched me, I did not stop him. The next morning I told myself it was a terrible mistake that would never happen again. I made that promise firmly. I believed it completely. But then he texted me. "Thank you for last night. You're the only one who really gets me." I stared at that message for a long time. Something about it felt wrong in a way I could not name. Something about how he had placed me above Camille without saying her name. Something about how the message created a private world between us that had not existed the day before. I should not have replied. I replied. That was the crack. Just one small yes where there should have been a no. But he was patient and he was skilled and he knew exactly how to widen a crack slowly enough that you never feel the moment it becomes a break. The pattern built itself quietly. Late texts. Long conversations about his feelings and his frustrations and his sense of being misunderstood. He never said anything that crossed an obvious line. He was far too careful for that. He just kept building a space between us that felt private. Sacred. Ours alone. He made me feel chosen. And I was lonely enough and trusting enough to step into that space without understanding what I was stepping into. Until my body started changing and I understood too late. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in March. I sat on the edge of my bed for 2 full hours before I could make myself move. Then I called him. Not Camille. Him. Because by that point he had reorganized my instincts so completely that he was the first person I reached for in a crisis. When I told him, his voice went very quiet. Then he said, "You need to take care of it. Not we. Not I will help you. Just you. And take care of it, as though it were a minor inconvenience requiring a simple administrative solution." I went to the clinic alone. I sat in the waiting room alone, surrounded by strangers and fluorescent lighting and a particular silence that belongs only to places where people carry things they cannot say out loud. I cried alone in the car afterward. I bled alone for days, telling Camille I had a stomach bug so she would not come over and see the truth written across my face. He sent one message the day after. It said, "How are you feeling?" I told him I was okay. I was not okay. When I saw him 4 days later at Sunday dinner, he passed me the bread and asked warmly about my week. As though nothing had happened between us at all. I told myself it was finished. I made that promise every morning in the shower for 3 weeks. Standing under the hot water, repeating it like a prayer. It is done. It is over. You will never let this happen again. I kept my replies to his text short. I avoided sitting near him at family dinners. I left early when he was there. I thought I was getting free. But he was patient. That was always his greatest weapon. He did not chase. He waited. He pulled back just enough to make you wonder if you had imagined everything. He went quiet long enough for the absence to feel like something was missing from your life. Then one evening he came to return a book Camille had left at my apartment. She was at a work event. He knew that. He stood in my doorway and looked at me in a way that tightened something in my chest. He said he missed me. He said I was pulling away and it was hurting him. He said nobody understood him the way I did and that he had been completely alone since I went cold. Every word was a hook. I understand that now. But I did not understand it then. I broke. And that is how I ended up pregnant a second time. Not through recklessness. Through being caught inside something I still did not have the language to name. The second time was worse. Not the physical part. By then the physical part was almost familiar, which carried its own specific horror. The worst part was what happened in the waiting room while I sat there alone again. This time I knew exactly what I was losing. This time I could see, with uncomfortable clarity, that I was sitting in that clinic because a man had decided my pain was my problem to manage and his comfort was his priority. I could see the shape of something even if I could not yet name it fully. I walked out afterward into cold afternoon air and stood on the pavement for a long time. Something changed in me that day. Not healed. Not free. But cracked open just enough to let some light enter. I started asking questions I had been too afraid to ask before. Why did I always feel smaller after being with him rather than larger? Why did I feel ashamed in a way that had nothing to do with Camille and everything to do with how he treated me afterward? Why, every time I tried to pull away, did he know exactly what to say to pull me back? I did not have answers yet. But I was finally asking. And I realized something that scared me more than anything else had. I was not in love with Felix. I was trapped by him. And I had spent over a year not knowing the difference. Life on the surface kept moving the way life does. Sunday dinners. Family birthdays. Ordinary gatherings where people ate and laughed and believed everything was fine because on the surface everything looked fine. I sat across from Camille at her dining table and watched her be herself. Warm and generous and completely trusting. She had always been the more open of the two of us. The one who led with her whole heart without calculating the risk first. She trusted me more than anyone alive. She had said that publicly at her wedding. She said it to her friends. She said it directly to me more times than I could count. I was sitting across from her every Sunday carrying a secret that would break her. Felix was perfectly behaved at these dinners. Attentive to Camille in all the visible ways. A hand on her back. Filling her glass without being asked. Laughing at her jokes with his whole face. But once, when she stepped into the kitchen, he looked directly at me and sent a single text. I know you're pulling away again. We need to talk. I stared at my phone under the table. Camille came back carrying dessert and smiling and set my favorite dish in front of me because she had remembered and made it especially. She was still making my favorite meal while I was hiding everything from her. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She set her fork down and looked at both of us with a smile so full it made her eyes shine. She said, "I have something to tell you both." She was pregnant. The room tilted sideways. I heard the words, but they seemed to arrive from somewhere far away, filtered through distance, slowed down and strange. She was glowing in the way that word actually means, not as a figure of speech but as a real physical thing, lit from somewhere inside. She reached for Felix's hand across the table. He squeezed it. He said it was the best news he had ever heard. He said it with warmth in his voice and softness in his eyes and everything a woman would want from her husband in that moment. I watched his face while he said it. And for the first time I saw clearly what I had been refusing to see for over a year. There was nothing real behind his expression. Not cruelty. Not guilt. Just a very skilled performance. A man who had learned to produce exactly the right response at exactly the right moment. He had been doing it to me this entire time. The warmth. The feeling of being chosen. The sense that he saw me in ways nobody else did. All of it was performed. Delivered with the same practiced ease he was using right now. Suddenly I did not know whose life I was living anymore. I drove home that night and sat in my parked car for a long time. Camille's happiness pressed against something sore inside me. Not because I did not love her. Because I loved her enormously and she deserved every bit of that happiness. She deserved a husband who was present and real and true. She was not getting that. The worst part, the part one I'm most ashamed of, is that sitting in that car I felt something close to jealousy. Not of her pregnancy. Of her certainty. Her ability to sit at that table and feel completely safe inside her own life. I had lost that feeling so long ago I could barely remember it. Then my phone buzzed. Felix. A text sent while he was still inside the house with my pregnant sister. I need to see you this week. Don't make this difficult. Not please. No, I'm sorry. Now I understand this is painful for you. Don't make this difficult. I set the phone face down on the passenger seat and stared through the windshield at the empty street. Something tectonic was shifting inside me. The kind of change you feel before you can name it. Like the moment before a storm when the air changes quality and everything goes very quiet. He had whispered something to me months ago that I had held like treasure. I needed to look at it clearly for the very first time. He had said it 4 months into what was happening between us. We were sitting in my apartment late at night and he looked at me with those carefully constructed eyes and said, "I don't love her the way I love you." I had held that sentence close in the dark. I had turned it over when I could not sleep. I had used it to explain to myself why what we were doing was different from what it appeared to be. Why I was not simply my sister's husband's other woman. Why I was something real and chosen and true. I wanted to believe him so badly. God help me, I did believe him. But sitting in that car reading doesn't make this difficult. I finally heard that old sentence differently. He had told me exactly what manipulative people always tell the person they are using. You are the special one. You are the real one. The other person doesn't understand me like you do. It was not love. It was a technique. Practiced and deliberate and used on me because I was accessible and trusting and had already handed him my belief before he had to earn it. I had walked into it completely. Because I was lonely. Because he was skilled. Because I trusted Camille's judgment when she married him and so I trusted him before he ever had to prove himself to me. That was my biggest mistake. But I was finally seeing clearly. 3 weeks after Camille's announcement I found out I was pregnant again. I was in her bathroom. She had asked me to help sort the spare room for a nursery and I had slipped away with a test I had been carrying in my bag for 4 days, too frightened to take it at home. 2 pink lines. I sat on her cold bathroom floor holding the test and listening to my sister hum to herself in the next room, happy and expecting and entirely unaware. This time I did not cry. I sat completely still and felt the full weight of everything pressed down at once. My name is Natalie Adrian. And I need to pause here for just a moment, and before I tell you what happened next, take a second to like and subscribe. Because what I found later that night changed absolutely everything that happened next. It changed the direction of this entire story. It changed what I understood about Felix, about myself, about how carefully and deliberately I had been chosen as a target. I had been carrying this alone for over a year. 2 pregnancies. Countless lies. A man who had made himself the center of my world while using that position to take whatever he wanted. I was done. That night I picked up his phone while he was in the kitchen. I told myself I was looking for confirmation of something I already felt in my bones. What I found was so much worse than I had prepared myself for. There were other women. Not one. Several. Different names. Different conversation threads. All following a pattern I recognized immediately because it was the identical pattern he had used on me. The late-night texts. You are the only one who truly understands me. The manufactured closeness. The careful escalation. The way he positioned each woman as the special one, the real one, the exception. I was not special. I was not chosen. I was one of multiple women he had identified as accessible and trusting enough to be used this way. I sat on his kitchen floor because my legs had stopped supporting me, and I scrolled through message after message and felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not sadness. No shame. Anger. Clean and clear and clarifying. The kind that does not make you want to scream. The kind that makes you very quiet and very certain. I had been manipulated. Deliberately and skillfully by a man who had done this before and would absolutely do it again to someone else if nothing stopped him. My sister was pregnant with his child. She was planning a nursery. She was humming in the next room, believing herself completely safe. Something inside me finally snapped all the way. I put his phone back exactly where I had found it. I walked out of the kitchen. I told Camille I felt unwell and needed to go home. She hugged me warmly at the door and told me to rest. I drove home. I did not cry. I did not shake. I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and a pen and I wrote down everything. Every date I could remember. Every text I had saved. Every detail that formed the pattern of what Felix had systematically done. For the first time I was not asking what was wrong with me. I was asking what was wrong with him. That shift sounds small written down. It was enormous to live through. I started thinking clearly for the first time in over a year. The fog I had been walking through had been real, and it had been placed there deliberately, and stepping out of it felt like breaking the surface of water after being held under too long. I thought about what I needed. Evidence. A clear plan. Someone I could trust completely. I thought about Camille, pregnant and happy and deserving the truth more than she deserved comfortable ignorance. I thought about the other women on his phone, probably sitting somewhere right now inside the same fog I had just escaped, believing they were the only one, not knowing about each other, not knowing about me. I thought about his child growing inside my sister while he managed this entire operation around her with calm precision. I made a decision sitting at that kitchen table. I would not protect Felix for one single day more. I would not carry this alone anymore. I went to see him alone first. I know that will seem like a questionable decision. But I needed to see his face when he understood that I finally saw him completely. I went to his office on a Wednesday afternoon while Camille had her antenatal appointment. I showed him my phone. The texts I had kept. The dates I had documented. I told him calmly that I had seen his phone and I knew about the other women. He froze. Just for a moment. Just long enough that the real face appeared underneath the performed one. Then he smiled. Not a guilty smile. Not the expression of a man who had been caught and felt remorse. A slow, controlled smile that told me clearly he had navigated situations like this before and had a prepared response ready. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me the way someone looks at a minor problem they are confident they can manage. He said, "What exactly do you think is going to happen now, Natalie?" I told him I was going to tell Camille everything I knew. He nodded once. Slowly. The way you nod when someone has said something predictable. He studied me for a long moment. And then he said something that chilled me straight through. He said, "If you tell her, you will destroy her." He said it gently. Reasonably. Like a man doing me a genuine favor by pointing out something I had failed to consider. He said Camille was pregnant. He said she was happy. He said whatever story I had built in my head about what had happened between us, bringing it to her now would not save anyone. It would break a pregnant woman and potentially harm her child. He was using true things as weapons. That is what made it so devastating. Then he leaned forward and said, "You made choices too, Natalie. Whatever happened, you were not forced. If this comes out, your role comes out. Your mother finds out. Your whole family finds out. And Camille loses her marriage and her trust in her own sister simultaneously while she is carrying a baby." He paused to let that settle. Or you say nothing. You deal with what you need to deal with. And everyone moves forward. Deal with what you need to deal with. He was already planning a third clinic visit. Casually. As though it were a simple scheduling matter. I looked at him across that desk and understood something with complete clarity. He was not afraid. He had done this before. He knew exactly how to make the person he had used feel responsible for the consequences of exposing him. Now silence felt like another sin pressing down on top of all the others. I did not tell Camille that week. I know that was wrong. I have made my peace with how wrong it was. But I want to be honest about why. She called me 2 days after my meeting with Felix. Her second antenatal appointment had gone well and the baby was healthy, and she was overwhelmed with the particular mixture of love and terror that belongs to early pregnancy. She came to my apartment that evening and sat on my sofa and cried happy tears and talked about what kind of mother she hoped to be. She talked about Felix. About how much more present he had become since the pregnancy. About how she had been quietly afraid of what kind of father he would turn out to be, and now she could see everything was going to be okay. I sat beside her and held her hand. I had the words ready. I had rehearsed them in the car on the way over. But at the end of the evening she looked at me with her whole open face and said, "I don't know what I would do without you, Natalie. You are the only person in the world I completely trust." I could not break her that night. I know some people will read that as self-protection. Perhaps it was partly that. But it was also love, even if it was love expressed the wrong way at the wrong time. In the weeks that followed I started watching everything with new eyes. I was no longer inside the fog. I could see the whole landscape, and what I saw alarmed me in ways that went beyond the affair itself. Camille mentioned once, almost in passing, that some money had moved out of their joint account. Felix had said it was a business expense. She had not remembered agreeing to it. She was not alarmed. She trusted him completely and had no reason yet not to. I was alarmed. I thought about the multiple women on his phone. I thought about what maintaining that many simultaneous false intimacies actually required. Time. Attention. But also money. Hotels sometimes. Gifts. The practical cost of performing love in multiple directions at once. Where was that money coming from? I started listening differently to small things Camille said without realizing their significance. A weekend where Felix claimed to be at a conference but had no details she could verify. A dinner cancelled with a vague excuse. His phone is always face down on their table now. I thought about whether Camille was being deceived not just emotionally but financially. Whether the woman planning her nursery was also being quietly drained by the same man. I needed the complete picture before I went to her. Because she deserved all of the truth. Not a carefully selected portion of it. I spent 2 careful weeks gathering what I could legally access. A close friend named Dara worked in financial compliance. I did not tell her everything. I said I was concerned about some account activity and asked what patterns she would look for if someone was moving money without their partner's knowledge. She explained it quietly and precisely. I went back to the things Camille had mentioned and I thought about what I had access to. Camille had shown me their household budget spreadsheet once during a renovation they were planning. She had shared it on a cloud drive and never removed my access. I opened it that evening. The spreadsheet showed standard monthly expenses laid out neatly. But there were recurring transfers in a category labeled professional development. Between 30 and 60,000 naira. Every single month for 14 consecutive months. I checked the dates. They began the same month Felix had first appeared at my apartment door. Professional development. 14 months. Paid consistently from their shared household account into somewhere I could not see. He was funding his other life using the money that was supposed to keep their home running. The money that would eventually need to cover a baby. He was not just emotionally dangerous. He was stealing from her. From their home. From the account that would pay for their child together. And I was still carrying that same man's child inside me right now. I sat with that through a very long night and then made a decision I could not take back. I stopped all contact with Felix completely. I blocked his number on every platform. I did not open the email he sent from an address I did not recognize. When his car appeared on my street one evening, I did not go to the window. It hurt in a way that surprised me. Not because I loved him. I understood by then that I had never truly loved him. I loved how I felt when he paid attention to me. Seen. Understood. Important. Losing that feeling, even knowing it had been manufactured, left a real hollow space. Discomfort is not a reason to go back to something that was destroying you. I focused instead on what I needed to do for Camille. I organized everything I had gathered carefully. The screenshots from his phone were taken before I put it down. The budget spreadsheet showing the professional development transfers. The dates and the documented pattern. I thought about how to tell her. I thought hard about the pregnancy and what she could absorb and in what order she needed to hear things. I was not trying to manage her. I was trying to make sure that when I finally told the truth it was the whole truth, laid out clearly enough that she could see exactly what had been done to both of us. I was not protecting myself anymore. I was preparing to protect her. Then Felix appeared at my door on a Saturday morning and everything accelerated. He did not look like himself. The careful polish was gone. He looked like a man who had not been sleeping and was beginning to understand that the control he had always counted on was slipping away from him. He asked me to let him in. I did not open the door fully. I stood in the gap and looked at him. He started with an apology. He said he knew he had handled things badly. He said he genuinely cared about me. He said there were things between us that were real and that we could find a way forward together if I would just let him explain. I watched his eyes while he spoke. They were not sorry. They were running calculations. He was deciding in real time which version of himself would be most effective on me right now. I felt absolutely nothing. The apology shifted into warning. He said I did not understand what I was about to do to Camille, to my family, to him. Then it shifted into desperation. Promises invented on the spot. A future built from nothing in 30 seconds. I watched all 3 stages without moving or speaking. When he finished I said, "I need you to leave now, Felix." He said, "Natale, please." I said, "This is completely over. All of it." He stood in my doorway for a long moment. Then he left. I closed the door and leaned against it and breathed steadily until my chest stopped hurting. I knew exactly what I had to do next. I called Camille and asked if I could come over. She said of course, immediately, in her warm, easy way. She said she would put the kettle on. She sounded genuinely happy to hear from me, the way she always did, the way that had never changed no matter what I had been hiding. I drove to her house with steady hands and an unsteady chest. She opened the door in her pajamas, her pregnancy showing now, her face completely open and glad to see me. She had made tea exactly how I liked it without being asked, the way she had done my whole life. We sat in her kitchen and I told her. I did not start with myself. I started with what I had found on his phone. The other women. The pattern that was identical across every conversation. Then I showed her the budget spreadsheet. The professional development transfers. 14 months of money leaving their joint account. I placed every document in front of her one at a time. I spoke slowly and did not look away from her face, even though watching her face receive this information was the most painful thing I have ever done in my life. She listened without interrupting once. When I finished, the kitchen was completely silent. Just the refrigerator humming. Just two sisters sitting across from each other with the truth finally filling the space between them. That silence was worse than any screaming could have been. She sat with it for a long time. Then she looked at me directly and began asking questions. Specific, clear, precise questions. When did it start? How long did it continue? What exactly happened and in what order? She asked them calmly, the way someone asks questions when they have decided they need the complete information before they allow themselves to react. I answered every single one honestly. Then she went quiet again for a stretch that felt endless. Then she asked the question I had known was coming from the moment I walked through her front door. She asked it softly, almost gently, as though she understood it was going to cost us both something enormous to get through it. She said, "Are you pregnant right now? With his baby?" My throat closed completely. I could not make my voice work. I nodded. And then I waited. I sat across from my sister who was carrying his child and had just learned I was carrying it too, and I waited for everything I deserved. The fury. The devastation. The word that would end us. I had told myself I could handle whatever she said. Sitting there in that kitchen, I was not sure that was true. I waited for her to tell me I was the worst person she had ever known. I waited for her to tell me to leave and never come back. She did not scream. She did not reach across the table to hurt me, though I would have understood completely if she had. She sat perfectly still for a long moment. Long enough that I heard the refrigerator humming again and the distant sound of traffic outside and my own breathing, which was not steady at all. Then she said, "We've both been lied to." I looked at her. Her eyes were wet but her voice was level. She said she had been sitting with everything I had laid in front of her and she could see the shape of it. She could see that what Felix had done to me was not an accident or a moment of weakness. It was a system. She said, "He chose you because you were close to me. Because I trusted you completely and that gave him access to both of us. Using you was never about you. It was about control." I had spent over a year feeling like the guilty one. The one who had failed her. The one whose weakness had caused all of this. She reached across the kitchen table and took my hand. She said, "You are not the person who hurt me. He is." And suddenly, impossibly, we were sitting on the same side of it. Two sisters. Both wounded by the same person. Both finally seeing the whole picture clearly at the same time. Neither of us whole. But together. We moved carefully and quickly after that night. Camille contacted a lawyer friend the same evening I told her everything. We met with her 2 days later and laid out every piece of documentation we had gathered. The financial transfers. The pattern of behavior across multiple women. The evidence I had collected. The lawyer was direct. The financial misconduct alone gave Camille significant legal grounds. The pattern of behavior across multiple relationships would be relevant to proceedings. She needed to act immediately to protect her assets before Felix understood the full extent of what we knew. Camille opened a personal account that week and moved what she legally could. We reached out carefully to 2 of the women on his phone. Not all of them. Two who we believed might be in the same position I had been in, not knowing about each other, believing they were the only one. We told them what we had found. They were devastated. Both of them were also deeply grateful to finally understand what had been done to them. Felix found out when his lawyer received the first formal letter. He contacted Camille. She did not respond. He contacted me. I did not respond. He sent long messages cycling through every stage I had watched him perform at my front door. Apology, then justification, then threat, then desperation. We read none of them. Within weeks he had lost the life he had built so carefully. But the wreckage he had left inside both of us was still there. And that part was not finished just because he was gone. I stood alone in my apartment on a Thursday morning 3 months after that night on Camille's bathroom floor. No more hiding. No more carrying something in the dark that was slowly crushing me from the inside. No more performing normalcy over the top of something enormous. I had made my decision about the pregnancy. Not because he told me to deal with it. Not out of fear or shame or someone else's convenience. Out of my own clarity. My own understanding of what I needed. My own choice was made freely for the first time since all of this began. That decision was mine. I will keep it. It did not fix everything. Camille is continuing her pregnancy with the full support of our family. She has difficult days. She also has days when I can see the real her returning. The woman who existed before Felix organized his life around deceiving both of us. We speak every single day. I am in therapy for the first time in my life. Sitting with someone who helps me understand how a person can be manipulated so carefully they cannot see it happening while it is happening. It is slow work. It is necessary work. I am sharing this because I know someone reading these words is inside the fog I was in. Someone who has been told they are the special one. Someone who feels chosen and trapped simultaneously and does not understand that those two feelings should never exist together. You are not broken. You are not the guilty one simply because someone skilled chose you. I destroyed parts of my life chasing something I believed was love. But telling the truth saved what was left of me. And it saved my sister too.